Greetings and welcome to another edition of the Pedalshift Project. The Pedalshift Project is a series of conversations, thoughts, and experiments around the bike touring lifestyle. From tips and tricks to ideas on how to ride your ride, let's shrink the world by bike. Show notes and more are available at pedalshift.net/245, and you can email the show at pedalshift@pedalshift.net or text me at 202-930-1109 and check Pedalshift out on all the socials as well. Hello, everybody, and welcome to the 245th edition of the Pedalshift Project. My name's Tim Mooney, and as you are listening to this, as this is released, we have just passed the 8th birthday of the Pedalshift Project. June 8th was its actual birthday, and this is being released on June 10th. So a belated happy birthday to the Pedalshift Project. It started all the way back in 2013, which is kind of bananas. And I just wanted to say, whether you have been with the show for 8 years, 8 months, or 8 minutes, you all rock. Thank you so much. This has been such a pleasure to produce all these years, and look forward to bringing more episodes to you. Like this one, perhaps. On this edition of the show, I am dipping my big toe back into the interviews again. I haven't been doing interviews for a while, but here we are back. I had a great conversation with Caleb Werntz about his past tours, his future tours, and how it all intersects in his life. And I just thought it was a really interesting conversation. Of course, the hook to the whole thing is, if you got an animal involved with your bike touring, then I'm in. There's your secret. Caleb travels with his cat Marilyn, and as you all know, I have talked about in the past of the one guy that I ran into back in the 2014 tour who had his cat with him, and that just fascinated me because cats are such strangely intriguing creatures to me. I'm not a cat guy. We do have a cat, Jackson. The odds of me ever being able to tour with that cat, 0. So I'm always just kind of in awe of folks like Caleb who brings along cats like Marilyn with him. So without further ado, Caleb Werntz is a filmmaker who has overcome homelessness by learning to live on a bicycle. He's joined on his epic tours by a calico cat named Marilyn, who have collectively ridden over 6,000 miles in the last 8 years. They are preparing for another major tour this summer where Marilyn will take the captain's chair and Caleb will create video and book content to inspire others to pursue their dreams. I wanted to kind of start off by asking a question that I've been meaning to ask almost everybody who's been on the show because I think it's such a formative thing. What's your earliest memories of being on a bicycle?
Thank you, Tim, for having me on the show, first off. This question does bring me to a little bit of tears thinking about it. Was in a graveyard where my grandparents were buried that my dad taught me how to ride a bike and let me go for the first time without training wheels. And I just remember kind of riding through, and pretty emotional memory considering the way that my relationship with my dad would end up going.
Talk more about that, if you're comfortable.
No, I am comfortable. I wasn't able to have as deep of a relationship with my father as I really wanted to. And I've maturing into my own man. I've kind of got a sense of who he had to be as his own man. And it's just a sad kind of memory because I wanted my dad to be in my life forever, but we ended up not having the closest relationship.
It's really interesting how the bicycle can be such a memory provoker for all things having to do with relationships and things like that. And taking off those training wheels is it feels like such a major life, life moment for so many people. So it's interesting that that's a piece of it for you as well.
I went on my last bicycle tour last year across the country, and somebody who was leaving me behind here in Portland ended up actually telling me that when I was leaving, they sensed that what I was really looking for was for my father. And I did go visit my dad, but it was really an emotional moment when he said that to me because it was true. I think my whole life I've been looking for for my dad to be proud of me.
I find that there a lot of the folks that I run to on the road, that there are a lot of folks that are rolling away from things, and there's a lot of people that are rolling towards things.
Yeah.
What's your take on that?
That's like the song I think people have sung to me a lot, man. Do I have these habits of just leaving or running away? Like my dad left our family, and I have a lot of thoughts about those, but I can keep it really brief. I don't want to take any trip from here on forward running away from something, but being on the offensive end of it, even if it does seem destitute and might mirror like a homeless situation that I was in before.
I've talked about in a more of a in a jokey context, but maybe it's not something to joke about so much, but that, there's a fine line between being homeless or experiencing homelessness and not while you're on bicycle tour for so many people. For a lot of people, that's about the closest they get to understanding what that means. What's your take on that?
Well, that's where the story for the whole touring story actually begins. I was homeless in California. My aunt had kicked me out of her house, and I went to a homeless shelter and met a guy who had been touring from New York to Alabama to where we were in Southern California. So because of that, the story he told me, and because of my own situation, I didn't want to just sit around and be homeless. I wanted to go on a Alexander Supertramp kind of adventure. So I stole a bicycle from the homeless shelter, and he taught me how to live on the road for 100 days from SoCal to Southern Oregon, when he mysteriously left me and I rescued she was then 2-month-old calico Marilyn. And I think I'll answer your question first before that. As far as homelessness on a bike goes, it's more of a state of mind, because I was homeless on a bicycle before with no destination in mind. And then I settled down into community for years and got a great support group. So now my touring is kind of with the understanding that there are people who do care about me, that I can connect with still.
It's so funny you made the reference to Into the Wild. That was the Alexander Supertramp reference there, for folks who are listening. And that's a book that I recently revisited after a long time off. And I found that it spoke to me a little bit differently now than when I first read it. I'm curious, how much of an influence was that on you?
Major. I was 19. I was in film school when somebody first told me about the movie. And when I first got to understand what it would be like to leave something as a young man or as a young person and be like, no, I want to find out how to get the life that I want. What about whether I'm running away from something or not? And one of the last things he said was, happiness is only real when shared. And this guy took, I think, solitude and pushing against the current of the world too far, maybe was a little too selfish and wanted to find it on his own. But I fully believe that it is the best is when you can share your life with other people.
Yeah, it's an interesting juxtaposition, isn't it? It's sort of like there was a lot of really profound truth in what he was doing, yet the path he ended up walking obviously ending in tragedy. Spoiler alert, everybody. But it's a really interesting book, and I'm always interested in folks that found inspiration from it. So I want to back up. So you end up, you're between homes. We'll put it that way, and you end up with Marilyn, your cat. How did that end up specifically? Were you kind of seeking out companionship like that, or did it just did she fall in your lap? How did that all happen?
I wanted a Pokemon, I wanted an animal to be with me, like a Pikachu. And so I had gotten this idea about the cat, had seen a picture of a cat on a balcony railing, like halfway hanging over the city and halfway on deck. And I just love cats because they're so strong and so confident and so relaxed. But I got her, at a Walmart parking lot. These teenage girls were giving away cats in the back of their car. And I went up, I said, show me the girls. And she gave me her and her sister, same color pattern, but white and gray. Mine's tricolored brown and tan and white. And I picked Marilyn because her sister was looking at me pretty longingly, like, I need you around. But Marilyn was like one eye on me, one eye out on the road. And I knew I wanted a cat who could also hold her own adventure. So I took Marilyn, walked with her for a bit, looking at her. I named her because I knew people would want to take pictures of her, cleaned her up. And from that point on, I kind of threw her on my shoulder pretty much immediately on the bicycle and was just going to sense like, is she going to hold on or not? And I was going to slow down if she was starting to fall off, but no leash, no harness, 2 months old, held on.
Why Marilyn? What was the impetus to name her that?
Like Marilyn Monroe, because she would be very famous. I knew she would be very famous. And somebody ended up calling her Marilyn Monroe, like living on the road. Yes.
Better than Marilyn Manson, I suppose. But, hey, if that was it, that was it, right?
Yeah.
So I think you might have already alluded to how this works, but how does Marilyn ride with you? Do you secure her in any way, or has that evolved over time?
Evolved over time. When she was young enough, I used to be able to keep her in my inside coat pocket. She'd wake up from the tent, she'd still be sleepy, just slide her inside inside my jacket pocket and carry her in stores and stuff. But she got bigger on the road pretty fast. I used to carry her on my shoulder, but then I got a front basket for her. Took a break from the road for some years. And then last year was our first major trip again, and had a front basket. The top handle, I used it like a convertible top, and I had a shower curtain and a sun reflector shade on it, so that kind of at all conditions, I could put the top down, keep it up, and she would 5.5 hours, not a peep. Whereas in the first trip, she was more vocal, but now it's so impressive that she understands that this is her life.
Yeah, it's interesting because, animals are so, at least in my experience, so resilient, and they will adapt to almost any kind of a surrounding, within certain boundaries. But it seems like that Marilyn, since she's been on the road for so much of her life, especially early on, that's sort of like, this is no different than the house cat that knows no difference from the living room to the dining room to the backyard.
Well said. Exactly.
Last time I was hanging out, and this was a few years ago, I was in a campground in California, and I ran into the only other guy that I've ever run into who was traveling with a cat. It feels like it's not unique, but it's certainly, you don't see that as much as folks traveling with dogs. And he let his cat roam pretty freely in camp. What's Marilyn's kind of ground rules? Is she leashed up, or do you let her roll?
When she was younger, I used to be able to just get to camp, let her off the leash, and I knew by the morning she would be in my lap. And that's probably still the case. But oh man, I wish I wasn't this way. But this new trip I'm going to go on is going to be completely different, and putting Marilyn in the captain's seat. But nowadays I do keep her in the tent, kind of when we get to camp, because I want her to be safe.
Sure. Oh, absolutely. Yeah. I mean, safety is like the kind of our number one goal. We're traveling with our pets with us, because it's one thing, like I can take a certain degree of risk that is probably a little bit higher than I would when I'm rolling with my dog in the front carrier there, because it's like, well, I can handle more risk for myself, but maybe not for Belle or any of my other dogs. How do you feel about that?
Man, that's exactly how I did my last trip across the country. And there were so many places that I wanted to stop on my own and just be like, no, I'm going to take my time here. But I just kept thinking about Marilyn. Even when we were hitting bumps and the bike would jump, I was just mostly thinking about Marilyn and getting her to a comfortable spot. So this time is going to be different on our new tour. I want her to kind of dictate the pace. I want her to hang out areas a little bit more, and maybe even go in the direction that I sense that she wants to go.
Well, she's in the captain's chair. I mean, she's the one who gets the call, right?
Right.
Tell me, where have you gone before? Like, and more about the past tours, and where you visited, and maybe some of a favorite story or two.
Yeah. First tour from Southern California to Oregon, by far, hands down, probably the best spot on the whole California coast is Elk Prairie Campground.
Oh, yes.
Oh, yes. When you see them.
I know it well.
My riding partner told me, he was like, I'd come 500 miles in any direction to come here. And I've been there twice, and I know why. When you wake up in the morning and there's elk just hanging out. The redwoods up to Grants Pass, Southern Oregon, then over through the Great Basin of Oregon to Boise, up the collar of Idaho to Spokane, each for their own reason. First east to maybe go back home to New Hampshire, then north because marijuana is legal in Washington, and then west because Marilyn would like having a litter box of the beach. I thought that would be fun. So we went to Seattle, then south to San Francisco, The bicycle got 2 flat tires at one moment. I was pretty much exhausted of riding because I was homeless with no goal. So I hitchhiked back into Oregon, and that's where I settled down for about 7 years. And then this last tour last year was from John Day, Eastern Oregon, down to Boise. I didn't go to Baker City and Missoula to catch the Transamerica. I thought I would be cool and cut across the bottom of Idaho. Spoiler, don't need to do that. And then up to Idaho Falls, which is very nice, to Jackson Hole. Had a little bit of trouble in Alpine, but I think for my safety, I won't talk about that. You can read the book. Went down to Colorado through Breckenridge and then down to Pueblo. My mom picked me up, drove me back to Texas, flew me to Tennessee, had a friend drive me one way to DC, and then we bicycled from DC through Massachusetts. You know, when you get into New England, so many small states, but all the way up to Maine, and then back across the top of New Hampshire and Vermont to Saratoga Springs, New York is where we ended.
What strikes me most about the routes that you do is that they tend not to be kind of the classic bike touring routes. I mean, certainly in parts. Is that by design? I mean, I know when you deviated out west, you were like, don't do that. But I'm curious, what's sort of the method to your madness here?
I want to find, I know there's more routes than what the Cycle Association puts out. No, there's other ways to, and I think that's part of the freedom, like the frontier is finding your own routes. So I like to stick to them where where the stakes are high, where I don't want to get it off course. But if I can, I'll map out my own route from Google Maps.
What's the reaction been like for you while you're on the road? Because you've got a couple things going on. You know, you're between homes. You're traveling with a cat. Like, did you ever experience any negativity on either of those two fronts? And if so, how did you handle that?
The homelessness one, yes. When I first took out, because I looked like a bum, and people who were having a hard day, like bigger cities, might shout out the window, like get a job. But especially with the cats, my riding partner told me as soon as I got Marilyn, like, she's going to be it's not saving grace, but she's going to bring you what you need. And that's what's going to make this tour different. Because people loved Marilyn. Like, I would love pulling her out on busy bike paths and catching all of these looks. And whenever I did pull her out, I wouldn't do it much because I didn't like the attention. But this trip is going to be different. Because Marilyn, on an entertainment level, I'm doing vlogs and I'm writing books about our trips. And I want, when we go into these national parks and when we go places, I want people to enjoy Marilyn. And so that's where I've come up with calicocycles.com. And that's how we're going to do this trip, is funding videos and blogs, essentially so I can get to living my filmmaker and traveling dream full time. So I'm going to pretty much put her out there more and share her with the world.
That's very cool. I want to definitely hear more about what your plans are in a second, but I know the last year has been beyond challenging for so many of us who, who like to travel by bike. What was the biggest challenge for you traveling during COVID? And like, kind of as a follow-up, what are you looking forward to most as we round the corner out of it, as you prepare for your next big adventure?
You've asked questions about the bike maps before, and I use the electronic maps from, you'll have to help me here, the American Cycle Association.
Yeah, that's right. ACA. Yeah.
Those maps, some parts were pretty ineffective, like in Jeffrey City in Wyoming had a hostel and church, but because of COVID, a lot of like hostel places weren't open. And so whenever I was trying to find shelter, whether it was like a church, that would be difficult. And then rounding the corner now, I need to get my vaccine because I was kind of on the fence about it. But now that I'm going to be going out and meeting people and going into homes, I need to get that. So I'm more excited about people being out on the road more, sharing kind of the adventure with people. Hope to see more cyclists.
Yeah, I think that maybe in the last week or so, as we're sitting down talking, it's early to mid-May. And it feels like that something has clicked recently where I think as more and more people are getting vaccinated, I think the reality that what we had before is going to come back in some way sooner than I think a lot of people anticipated. So I hear what you're saying. It's sort of like, getting that vaccination is sort of almost like a park pass to the coolest theme park ever, So tell me more about what your plans are. I mean, you've alluded to a few of them. What specifically, what's on your agenda? And maybe the agenda is there is no agenda, but what are you looking at this year?
Looking at hitting the road as open-ended as I have in the past to really enjoy the trip. You can set confines. My boss was going to give me, hey, you can take a month of excused leave, but I don't want to confine my adventure to that. So the end of this month, my buddy is going to be driving me. We're going to be camping out somewhere closer toward one of the parks. And I'm going to be probably heading south first so that I can enjoy still some of the cool weather. And then before I hit the high areas like the Tetons and Yellowstone, I want to hit that more toward the summertime. And the goal is to make video vlogs, to make films, and to fully embrace the adventure, inspiring people, and living the life I feel like I was designed to do. And it's not exclusive to the bike touring. It just seems like this is what I'm really good at doing right now. Marilyn's still alive. It seems like the right direction to go. So that's why I started calicocycles.com, was to make a brand and to make something that people can get behind. So that's what we're going to be doing here at the end of the month. Pretty open-ended. The goal is to hit so much Patreon pledging so that I can start to build my life kind of out of our bicycle tour.
Yeah, it sounds really cool and very exciting. So everybody go check out that website. And I'm excited to follow your adventures and to see how Marilyn adapts to sort of post-COVID bike touring and all of the great adventures ahead of you. Thanks so much for joining us here on the show.
Yeah, thank you for having me, Tim.
I thought Caleb's story was really intriguing. And, I've talked to a lot of folks who were in Caleb's position between homes. And while I'm on tour, and I'm always kind of intrigued with all of that because bicycle touring is, as I've talked about for the last 8 years, it can be a lifestyle. It can be a bridge. It can be a place where people go to as an alternative to what I think most of us have as part of our lives. And I think that's kind of another magical element about bicycle touring, that it can accommodate those types of life transitions. And as you can tell, I think Caleb has really been inspired by it, has used it to move on to this next phase of his life. So I thought this was a fun and interesting story to share with all of you. So again, thank you, Caleb, for joining the show. And as always, we like to close out the show with a special shout out to the Pedalshift Society. Because of support from listeners like you, Pedalshift is a weekly bicycle touring podcast with a global community, expanding into live shows and covering new tours. If you like what you hear, you can support the show for $5, $2, or even $1 a month. And there's one-shot and annual options. If you're not into the small monthly thing, check it all out at pedalshift.net/society. On to the society. Kimberly Wilson, Caleb Jenkinson, Cameron Lean, Andrew McGregor, Michael Hart, Keith Nagel, Brock Didis, Thomas Skadow, Marco Lowe, Terrence Manson, Harry Telgadas, Chris Barron, Mark Van Ram, Brad Hipwell, Mr. T, Nathan Poulton, Stephen Dickerson, Vince LaGreco, Cody Florchinger, Tom Beninati, Greg Braithwaite, Sandy Pizzio, Jeff Muster, Seth Pollock, Joseph Quinn, Byron Patterson, Joachim Robert, Ray Jackson, Jeff Fry, Kenny Mikey, Lisa Hart, John Denkler, Steve Henkel, Miguel Quinones, Alejandro Aviles Reyes, Keith Spangler, Greg Towner, Dan Gebhardt, Jody Zeranin, Lucas Barwick, Michael Baker, Brian Bechtal, Reinhard Biggle, Greg Middlemas, Connie Moore, William Gothman, Brian Benton, Joan Churchill, Mike Bender, Rick Weinberg, Billy Crafton, Gary Matushak, Greg Latois Lopez, James Sloan, Jonathan Dillard, John Funk, Tom Bilch, Ronald Piroli, Dave Roll, Brian Hafner, Misha LeBlanc, Ari Messenger, David Grotke, Wally Estrella, Sue Reinert, John Letko, Stephen Granada, Philip Mueller, Robert Lackey, Dominic Carroll, Jackie McCulloch, John Hickman, Jack Smith, Carl Presseau, David Neves, Patty Louise, Terry Fitzgerald, Peter Steinmetz, Timothy Fitzpatrick, Dave Fletcher, James Stratakis, David Neves, Mike Lazuski, Hank O'Donnell, David Zanoni, David Weil, Matthew Sponseller, Chad Reno, Daniel Greger, Spartan Dale, Carolyn Ferguson, Peggy Littlefield, and thanks to all past and anonymous folks for helping make this show happen. Thank you for joining. You can find Pedalshift at pedalshift.net for more great bicycle touring content. You can hear the Pedalshift project through Apple Podcasts or your favorite podcast app. Opening music courtesy of Jason Kent off his self-titled album. The track is called America. Check out his band Sunfield's latest release, Mono Mono, wherever cool music is available.